All right, let's talk about a crystal habit, or the form of a crystal that you see in thin section. The habit or form that you see in hand specimens is slightly different from what you see in thin sections, but you're probably more familiar with describing crystal habit in hand specimens. So just to look at a few examples of those terms, some apply to thin sections, some are less appropriate and probably could never be used to describe the habit of a crystal in a thin section. You might use cubic if you saw a crystal of pyrite in your thin section, or blocky for rectangular or squarish looking mineral in thin section, or acicular for a needle-like looking mineral, or prismatic if it preserves its prism shape. But terms like granular or massive or botryoidal don't really apply. Fibrous, sure, you could see fibers in a thin section. So consider that you're going to describe habit in thin section somewhat differently from how you do it in hand specimen. Here are some terms that could be used to describe crystal habit or form. And you have a set of these terms listed in your textbook as well. You might use acicular, anhedral, irregular, bladed, blocky, elongate, euhedral, fibrous, prismatic, rounded. And let's look at some examples. In this thin section, you would probably describe the green interference color mineral as irregular or anhedral. And the plagioclase in the gray colors, you could describe as, it could be blocky, maybe elongate is more appropriate. It conveys exactly what it looks like. It's an elongate mineral, and if you're trying to describe it to someone or to compare it to reference material for what you expect a crystal habit to be for a particular mineral, it's helpful to think in terms that communicate that. Here's another thin section. This is garnet, and there happen to be euhedral garnets. You see the 6 crystal faces of that garnet in the thin section. Or if you don't preserve those crystal faces, maybe the garnet will look more rounded. Those are appropriate terms for these crystals. Here's an example of a fibrous habit. You see the small wispy fibers in that crystal. Or minerals that preserve part of the crystal faces, or part of the, like a euhedral crystal form. You could call those prismatic. You might call this bluish crystal prismatic too, or maybe elongate would suffice. Here are some muscovites, and it looks like biotite in this lower thin section. And those aren't fibrous like the upper image, but they're elongate. They're not blocky because they're thin, elongate crystals. So I would go with just elongate. So what you learned in this module was the habit is the shape that a crystal takes. Habits like elongate, prismatic, blocky are appropriate for minerals in thin section. And that some habit terms are more appropriate for hand specimens because you can only see 2 dimensions in thin section. Terms like bladed or botryoidal maybe don't work so well. Now I'd like you to watch videos of thin sections 8, 76, and 99, and then complete the quiz on habit.